Guests of Sasquatch Experience do not necessarily reflect the opinion of the hosts, sponsors, or affiliates of the Sasquatch Experience. As always, listener discretion is advised.
911, what are you reporting?
We got someone or something crawling around out here.
Does a legend walk among us, lurking in the forests of our world?
Did you see what it was? Was it a person or an animal or?
I can't tell. All I know is that my central light came on and I just happened to glimpse and see this thing running across the yard. A good-sized man or something. Looks like a man. I don't know what it was.
For over 15 years, we've talked with scientists, researchers, investigators, and witnesses, trying to gain insight and proof around the existence of this mysterious entity.
Jesus Christ, you better... Dia!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh. Okay, hang on.
He's right...
Is he in your yard, sir?
Yeah, God, he's big.
Okay, what's he doing in your yard?
He's looking at me.
Join us as we continue into the investigation of the Sasquatch Experience. And good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Sasquatch Experience for Monday, February 17th, 2025. This is the crossover you've all been waiting for, probably next from Doctor Who and Star Trek. You've got SquatchDetective and the Fork Chop with our friends here tonight for a very exciting episode because Steve and I happen to be two of the most senior podcasters on Bigfoot on the planet. Steve, how the hell are you doing, my friend?
We're doing wonderful, marvelous, as I like to say. Look out for that.
Just got hit by my own microphone trying to take me out.
Yeah, it's amazing, in how many years we've been doing this that we haven't been injured, have an on-the-job podcasting injury. Although I did have a podcast once where a meteor did explode overhead, and that was caught on audio.
Well, wow. We did have one related injury, if you remember, and that was the Henry May spilling noodles on his crotch.
Ah, yes.
Ooh. Yeah, that was we used that soundbite forever. We also used to have the annual Ramen Noodle Awards because it literally sounded like a Yeti screaming in the... We'll have to find... I think Steve has it. I think occasionally from time to time he plays it. But what a hell of a time we had back in the early days, back in Blog Talk Radio. None of us on that platform anymore. But here we are, still making it, still going. And Steve, I guess, for folks who aren't familiar with you, Steve, you've got a background in private investigating loss prevention, with evidence analysis and forensics. You've done just about every type of investigating you could think of. You've used that to build your framework for the investigating you do into cryptozoological and paranormal phenomena. You just don't do Bigfoot. You branch across the whole spectrum. But you and I have, we became acquainted, became friends over the Sasquatch mystery.
Sure. And the paranormal thing, I was in it from about 2010 till about 2019. I've kind of stepped back from that a little bit now. A lot of buku weird stuff, too weird for me. And and when I mean weird physically. In my tenure of doing that, I got a lot of physical ailments that were Bell's palsy and hives and boils and really odd.
All the biblical plagues, huh?
Yeah, I know.
Yep.
I know it.
Well, that's the associated dangers with that though. Yeah. Right.
Absolutely.
These things do happen. I know this isn't a paranormal podcast per se, but That was one of the fears I've always had going into doing those type of researches, Steve, is the,
Yep.
potential attachment or the physical,
Yep.
ramifications of doing that investigating. And folks, whether you believe it or not, Steve will tell you that these things, sometimes it's more than a coincidence.
Well, yeah, I mean, to get hives. I mean, I didn't have hives since I was a little kid. To get boils, that even my doctor says I just don't understand it. And then another year I go to him. I have Bell's palsy. I had Bell's palsy for a few weeks, and he says I can't explain why this happened.
Yeah,
So it's just, and it was always right after certain investigations.
right. And when you do as much public presenting as you do, Bell's palsy is no picnic.
No, but luckily I caught it within, like, when the onset it first happened, because my first fear is that I was having a mini stroke
Right. Very
because I had
symptomatic.
but when I got to the ER, the doctor explained to me and showed me how to tell the difference, and it had to do with the eyebrows, because
Oh,
if you can move your eyebrow,
Huh.
like your one eyebrow on the side that's not moving, because my eyebrows, my eye wouldn't move, and or my eyelids wouldn't move. So he's, automatically they put you on antiviral stuff. He says, because we caught it early, it should clear up in 9 days and you'll be fine. No permanent effects. The people who get the permanent effects are the people who don't treat it for way too long.
gotcha.
Or have Botox in their eyebrows don't move.
I guess then you're screwed. Hey, Henry, thanks for popping in tonight. Henry May, folks.
Henry.
Henry must be having some difficult. There he is. We got a little bit of signal back. Welcome to Planet Earth, Henry.
I was having some difficulties. Steve-O!
Hey, Henry.
So Steve and I started talking last week. I mean, Steve and I talk randomly throughout the year, but we started talking last week because he's got a new book coming out. He's got 4 books previous to this, and if you want him to start getting into your, you can go to SquatchDetective.com. I'm sure he's got links to buy his books on there. But you got 50 Large, The Real Story of the Georgia Bigfoot Body Hoax, What Would Sasquatch Do, The Sasquatch Playbook, The Psychology of Bigfoot, and the brand new book coming out, Bigfoot, a scientific examination. So Steve's got quite the writing credentials behind him now, writing his 5th book, which, folks, it could probably be 6 or 7 books if you'd have broken it up a little bit. But this new one's a tome, and we're excited to talk about it tonight, Steve. So let's dive right into it. What the hell prompted you to write this one?
Well, the funny thing is the last book I wrote, The Psychology of Bigfoot, was really my antithesis of the Bigfoot witness. Very, everything is based in science and references and citations, and trying to put it all together on what makes a real Bigfoot witness seem credible, what makes a phony Bigfoot witness sound not so credible, and how to kind of tell the difference. And then we talk about other things like PTSD and why we don't get good photographs and pictures. Well, I decided to start doing a scientific paper on the psychology of Bigfoot witnesses. And when I got done with it, I was like, I should do this on all the great questions and my philosophies, and the reason why, when people say, well, can Bigfoot use infrasound? Well, can it? Let's do the research on it. Let's look it up. Let's take some sources. And before you know it, in the book, I have 49 separate scientific papers broken up into 3 separate categories, with an introductory scientific paper and an epilogue scientific paper, which it'd be very quite the introductory one is basically making a case for a Bigfoot or creating a scientific profile of a Bigfoot. And the very end is all the evidence that supports Bigfoot being a real creature.
Nice.
I was trying to pull the paper up here. I had it saved into my.
Can I ask a question?
You can ask all you want to, buddy.
So you've been gathering evidence of witnesses for how many years?
Since 1998.
Okay, so this might work. I'm not sure. Have you noticed that the physical representation of witnesses' idea of what Bigfoot has evolved to what is shown on multimedia and movies and things like that? Like lately, I've noticed a lot of the Bigfoot-esque type things all look like Harry from Harry and the Hendersons. But before that movie came out, they had a different look. It's kind of like how all the grays kind of look like the given alien from like Paul, or the given alien from another movie, or Close Encounters of the Third Kind, but originally they looked slightly different. Do you see that evolution too?
No, in actuality, in New York, the Bigfoot are actually described as quite lanky. Matter of fact, one witness I talked to last year, or I'm sorry, the year before last, said it looked like almost like a hippie. He goes, it just was like kind of, very longish, shaggy, grayish hair. It wasn't even a brown or a reddish brown or a black Bigfoot. It was kind of grayish. So I have not seen that. Most of the time we don't see that robust Harry and the Hendersons type Bigfoot here in New York. We always see the lanky,
Nice.
which to me kind of supports that people are all seeing the same type of creature because of the description.
Thank you, because I get a lot. I mean, me and Sean go to a lot of these places, and people come up with the stories, and I've just noticed that the narrative or what the story looks like my friend Snuffy makes some really cool Bigfoots. They all have that look, but he's doing it as an artist, and that's what he's using it from, interpreting from, not just Harry, but whatever. But I noticed that a lot of the people, when they start explaining Bigfoot, and me and Forker and Matt have had this conversation multiple times, we teach people how to fake sightings. We teach people how, and we don't mean to, but we have the conversation, people listen, and then they fake something. You know what I mean?
Well,
and I want to know if you were catching any of that.
Well, throughout history, we, as creatures of habit, we tend to describe things like we know them.
Yeah.
You go back to the 1800s, everybody called them wild men.
Right.
But they would describe essentially the same thing: large footprints, covered in reddish brown hair or brownish hair. I've heard them described. I've seen newspaper reports from the 1800s describing them as bear men. And then, somebody said there was, gorillas loose in the woods. So as we got to know the known creatures, people kind of associated what they look like with them.
I'm just going to say this. I really have to interrupt here. So, Steve, you mentioned about a witness stating that it looked like a hippie. And these guys here know my mom had an encounter, back in the 1980s. And she doesn't know anything about, but she described it as like a long, stringy haired, like rock type person. She didn't use the term hippie, but she used the term, like, somebody you'd see walking down the road with the long, greasy hair, and but she said it was a monster. It had an ape-like face. But as soon as you said that, I was like, wow, that hit the nail on the head.
We do have a question here from Scott in the chat. Scott asks, picking up from Baker's line of thought, do you feel, though, that there are enough stories out there now that people could create a credible sounding report without a personal experience?
Well, one of the things I try to do is educate people, because, people can create credible sounding stories, but they fall apart upon questioning. And a lot of times, even the stories break apart. And I'll give you a great example from a famous case, the Bigfoot Peeper case, where the guy had filmed this thing in the window originally. This is before, and he had the pictures. He's saying he sat there and filmed it for 7 minutes. Then his wife came in and screamed. So then I put my camera down and I got my gun. Well, why would you film it for 8 minutes and then because your wife screams, you feel the need to get your gun? what I've tried to do is try to take it from a like a criminal psychology type of look, like look at the pre-offense behavior, the offense behavior, and the post-offense behavior. And if none of it makes sense, and that obviously didn't make sense, is like, wait a minute, you're filming it for 7 minutes and your wife walks in, you didn't say anything to your wife, hey honey, look out the window. And then when she screams, then you decide to put your camera down and get your. None of it makes sense.
Yeah.
So a lot of the stories that come out, and there was a recent one I just did on my show, and I don't have the details enough in my head to paraphrase it too well. But again, the story did not. It broke down because it did not make natural order sense or psychological sense.
Yeah, no, and I think the frame of thought that you're on is spot on. People's behavior is often a lot more telling than what they're actually saying, right? And I think you're one of the people to teach me that a long time ago. But it's the things that aren't said that are the giveaways. And to your point in that one, I don't know how many people, if you have other folks around, you see something so extraordinary, you're not going to call somebody and say, hey, someone else get a set of eyes on this. What the hell is this?
Train.
And in that particular instance, the wife comes in the room and screams, probably didn't happen. You're right. More than likely didn't happen that way. I just have in my mind Steve going after that guy like George Henderson does with the guy on the bike. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like,
you got scared and ripped your 10 speed.
Yeah, what you really did is got scared and shit your pants and, it fell off your bike. He didn't touch you, and it's all downhill from there.
He starts crying.
But when you go through, I finally got the book pulled up here again. I thought I had it saved in my files, but it doesn't like that. And folks, I'm not kidding here when I say it's comprehensive. The table of contents, though, as we were saying right before we came up, if you're somebody that's going to use this as a reference book, somebody that's going to use it to help them along, Steve has this framed out very well because it's broken up in sections, biological, psychological, social science, and case studies furthering the research. I mean, it's all there. And I haven't made it all the way through the book yet. It's almost the size of Sasquatch the Apes Among Us. Steve, you might have the next book here to go up on the shelf next to it. Mm-hmm. But there are some very important topics that he touches on in here. And guys, they're topics that we've touched in the past. But one of the interesting ones I want to talk to you about, Steve, camouflage. Because, we hear all the time, is it become a woo thing or a situation where this thing kind of looks like the Predator, the Shimmerman scenario going on out there, but how Bigfoot just disappears or how it reappears? What's your thoughts on that? We don't have to go into the whole giveaway because we are trying to sell a book here for you, but some interesting topics that I think we do need to talk about. This is one of them.
Well, it's kind of funny. I cover this in a couple of different ways. In one particular way, in the new book, I cover it more of the animal world type of nature. Is that there's lots of creatures that adapt, including chimpanzees, gorillas, orangutans. They have natural camouflage. They blend just like a deer. A deer blends too into the forest. You hear a lot of times people see a deer cross the road. As soon as it goes into the forest, you look as you're driving by, you don't see it. It didn't cloak. It didn't jump into a portal. It didn't shapeshift. It didn't turn into the predator. It just naturally blends in with the fauna. Now, if you add a little bit of the psychology element of that, now you're seeing something and your mind is stuttering a little bit to figure out, what am I looking at? And by the time you're looking, it's gone and you've completely lost your kind of bearing on it. So there's a lot of normal reasons why Bigfoot disappears into the woods. It's not because it shapeshifts or it's translucent or any of that. There's a lot of stuff that obviously our metabolism or primate metabolism is not high enough to do those sorts of things that is basically claimed by the woo factor.
Well,
Go ahead, James.
We had this actually same discussion multiple times. So I'm digging a hole for my golf course, my mini putt, and I'm putting in one of those plastic liners. And I'm digging. I got a pickaxe. I'm digging everything. There's a deer behind me, maybe as close as the light behind me is from where I am. He's been there 15 minutes that I can think of. There's a deer across the thing. They both see me the whole time, but I didn't recognize they were there until the one deer decided to make enough noise that I heard him. And I think that's what people don't realize also is because we're walking into their territory. They're aware we exist. And then we acknowledge their existence, but by then they already have, oh, hey, Bob's over there, Steve's over there. I'm watching him, but I also know my exit plan if Steve notices me and I don't want to interact anymore. Where you're just like, oh, you're here, and then they're gone, and you're like, oh, it's got to be magic. It's not magic. They planned that whole interaction.
Right. Now, just picture that being a primate doing that, not an ungulate. How much more smarter is that going to be?
Yeah.
Right. And one of the things I appreciate about, again, going into the book is in each one of these sections, each one of these papers, you do have that chimpanzees, gorillas, right? You have known animal behaviors and known animal characteristics as a reference point in there. So you do a lot of the homework for the people that are reading this book, which is, the purpose if you actually are writing a scientific paper, people actually, give a damn about and want to learn something from. Particularly the camouflage was important because I think you touch in there too on, the type of hair coloration, the coloration being important because of how easily it can blend into the environment, the natural environment. Baker, you're talking about deer. That deer is the perfect color to blend into the area around it. Why would a Bigfoot be any different in that respect? Bears are that way. Other animals that reside in the wilderness are that way. But now think about it. Now I'm losing my train of thought here, but there was an animal whose hair is designed pretty much to kind of take on that characteristics or, reflect that coloration and, make it. Maybe it's a polar bear, right? Make it even more susceptible to blend in. Yeah, no, you're right. Because I think it was you that brought it up to me, Baker.
I got me the zoo books when I was a kid.
And that's where he ended his education. Go ahead, Steve.
But
Go ahead.
You make a perfect point. Is the thing with the deer is like I was in their habitat. I was making all kinds of noise, so they knew where I was exactly. And I had no clue they were stalking at me. If it would have been a bear or something huger that wanted to kill me, I was done. Because I wouldn't have noticed them until they come at me.
But just like most people that have an encounter with a Bigfoot, you're just doing everyday things. Yep. You're not doing anything out of the ordinary. I was just watching one of these last episodes. I think it was Skyline Sasquatch. They were talking to Mike Lucci. And we were talking to Mike on the video, and Mike's like, when I looked at all these reports, at least over 16% of these reports were driving encounters. Mm-hmm. People seeing these things as they're driving. When most folks, unless you're us and you're out there with the express purpose of trying to look for Bigfoot, aren't out there trying to find Bigfoot. They're just doing their normal everyday thing. And I think when they stumble upon a Bigfoot, I really believe it was because the Bigfoot made a mistake.
Now, you know what? I don't think that's necessarily true. I think the Bigfoot's just going about it a lot of times like you have the roadside crossings and stuff like that. That's just a Bigfoot doing their thing.
It's a normal thing, right? Usually they're a lot more cautious.
I don't think they made a mistake. I think it's just a complete happenstance. Like, because a lot of times the Bigfoot looks just as surprised as the person.
We do. In most situations. And I concede to that point. I think what I'm talking about is some of these more like obscure in the woods type sightings. Maybe not so much the roadside ones, Steve, because I think you might have a point there. But these things are seen accidentally. And that would be the hence it's surprise too. Like, wow, I can't believe I slipped up and screwed up. But then there's these reports, these things stepping out of portals and these things. And I just had an interview earlier today, and the host was really pressing on some of the more paranormal aspects of this. And fairly, he had a lot of, interesting questions, like how do we know it's not true? Because we can't. Steve, you make this point in your book. Like, it's not I'll let you make your point again.
Well, the biggest thing about adding the paranormal aspect to this is something called anthropomorphism.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
We tend to assign human thought processes, um, human behaviors, and human motives to animals that are not humans.
Right.
We cannot even do that with chimpanzees. And I just finished up another book, What Would Sasquatch Do 2, which is coming out in April. Again, very much like this book, except for it's a little less. It's not written like a scientific paper or a series of papers. It goes in different chapters. It discusses the behaviors of that, and I discuss anthropomorphism in that as well. And we can very easily assign, and admittedly, there were some primatologists that originally had anthropomorphized some chimpanzee behaviors, and then they realized, well, whoops, we were wrong. It was actually the reason why they were doing this was because of this. Like, you always hear that thing, well, if you kill a Sasquatch, if there's a dead body, you better look out because they're going to be coming back for revenge. Revenge is a human motive. Right? That's anthropomorphism. Animals in wildlife, including chimpanzees, don't have this revenge motive. I'm going to get even with this guy. They just don't have that.
Steve, we have another question from Scott. Scott asks, do you feel that as we have become more civilized, our ability to see animals or be aware of creatures in nature has decreased, i.e. being able to see deer or Bigfoot in their natural habitat? Have we distracted ourselves to the point, Steve, that we can't even notice them when they are around?
It depends. I'll give you a great example. We are attuned to our environment. All right. You ask somebody that grew up on the streets in New York City, they can stand on the street corner. If somebody shady comes walking around the corner, they're going to know it in a heartbeat. Right. If you grew up in the woods or the forest, you're going to know when something is amiss. So it doesn't have to do with necessarily our intelligence or losing something. It just happens to where our natural habitat is. The forest is no longer our habitat. It's the urban jungles that are our habitats now.
Right. Fair enough. Folks, we're at that time of the mid-show. We're going to take our break. Folks, you're listening to the Sasquatch Experience. Sean Forker, James Baker, Matt Arner, Henry May, with our guest tonight, Steve Kulls. Vance Nesbitt is out for the evening, but he did leave us with this nice little ditty, so we'll catch you on the flip side, folks. Stay tuned.
News team, assemble!
I want a dog. You guys have dogs? You got a dog? Hell yeah, man. You're right under my nose this whole time. You got 2 dogs? One of them's a husky and one of them's an Australian shepherd.
Ooh, close, but no.
What is it?
A lab and a mutt of some kind.
Oh, okay. I wasn't close at all. But you have an energy that's like, you know what? Sure, that's what I got, man.
Ah, yes, fur babies. You know, our friends, the Fargiorgios, they lost a fur baby family member, and all of us here at the Sasquatch Experience want to extend our condolences to Eric and Carrie Fargiorgio. Iggy was a good pup. And on that note, happy Monday night to you all as the cold wind and snow blows. But out of Ohio, there was an Ohio hunter could not believe his eyes when he ascended his tree stand and spotted what appeared to be Bigfoot bounding across a field. Witness Andrew Baughan reported the possible Sasquatch sighting, which occurred on the afternoon of December 28th near the community of Mansfield, Ohio. He reported this to the BFRO late last month, while appreciating the expansive view provided by a newly installed tree stand. The hunter recalled he suddenly caught sight of something unusual off in the distance. Quote, "It was a Bigfoot," Baughan marveled, "or a very big person fast moving across a wide open field. The peculiar biped creature, he observed, took fast big steps, not running, but still covering ground faster than someone should. It seemed very odd. Bond explained, that he noticed the mysterious figure because it was dark in color, which caused it to stand out from the wheat field it was crossing. Quote, I was looking for deer and saw this thing, the hunter wrote, and I almost freaked out. I would have freaked out. Bond subsequently descended the tree stand to allow his stepfather a chance to see the creature, but it had vanished into the woods before he could catch a glimpse of it. A follow-up investigation by Matt Moneymaker found the sighting report to be credible. The Sasquatch researcher specified and pointed to Bond's observation of the creature moving with brisk strides rather than full-out run, as an indication that the figure could very well have been a Bigfoot. When we come back, ow, fuck. See what I did there?
You're listening to the Bigfoot Bullhorn right here on the Sasquatch Experience.
It's not Gawkers, it's Got Knockers. Hey, have you been to the Squatchfield site on the interweb that has it all? Introducing GotKnockers.org. Stop on by for an intriguing story of the encounter that started it all. But wait, there's more. Got Knockers offers some fabulous merchandise like t-shirts, hoodies, onesies for the baby, plus a stunning array of jewelry and some fantastic sauces that will make your taste buds dance. But the coolest of all is a genuine Got Knockers tree knocker. Stop on by and say hi to the folks of Got Knockers, Gwendolyn and Michael Purcell. Get in on the action and just visit GotKnockers.org. Again, GotKnockers.org. It's the 2025 Fouke Monster Festival, celebrating the Fouke Monster and the legend of Boggy Creek. Brought to you by our friend Craig Woolheater. April 25th from 7 p.m. through April 26th to 8 p.m. of 2025. The location for this event is 201 East Red Cut Road in Fouke, Arkansas. There are confirmed speakers, which is follows: Chester Moore, Todd Neese, Daniel Allen Jones, Mitchell Whittington, and Jeff Stewart. Thanks again for listening to this edition of the Bigfoot Bullhorn right here on the Sasquatch Experience. And as Steve Kulls always says after slapping a Bigfoot in the face with a white glove,
until we meet again,
keep your toes in the mud.
Vance Nesbitt, folks. I challenge you to a duel, sir.
You big hairy
bastard. And folks, just to clarify, that's gotknockers.org, not gotknockers.org. I like to throw that out there because Vance always kind of, you never know what Vance is going to throw out there with that. But we wish Vance was here with us tonight, though. He had some very important things to take care of, more important than us, but we do appreciate him sending along this week's Bigfoot Bullhorn. And again, the Fouke, Arkansas Monster Conference. Go check that out. Steve, have you been down to one of those yet?
I spoke at the I think I spoke at what was it, the 20th? The 20th anniversary Texas Bigfoot Conference.
You had to look at one of his posters on the wall.
I did.
Steve and I, even before we came on air tonight, we forget which conferences we've gone to because we've gone to so many, and that's the one of the downsides to knowing each other for so long, but being around. You have to remember, once upon a time, there weren't so many conferences.
Yeah.
Now there's almost a different one a weekend, which is not necessarily a bad thing because we want this to be a lucrative experience. Ouch! Damn it! Again, a lucrative experience for everybody, but it's just a lot.
What is it? What is that? What is that? Mike spring loaded or something?
I don't know what the hell. I switched boom arms tonight because the old one just wasn't cutting it. But every time I turn around, I smack myself in the face.
Here comes the boom.
Here comes the boom. That's going to be the new tagline for the show, Big. Thanks. Anyhow, back to the important thing, Steve Kulls. So before we went on break, we were talking about camouflage and had some good discussion around that. But a couple more topics that I think we have to go into, Steve, is you have an interesting piece on vocalizations in there, and vocalizations are interesting, right? And I like how you break it down and you give associated primates with the type of calls they're known for and what they mean. And when we were on another show, you and myself and Eric Altman, we were on Billy Willard's show, Sasquatch Watch Radio. We were talking about communication, and I think you and I are pretty much aligned here on communicating, and I think it does kind of relevate to the intelligence that they hold, right?
Yeah, I mean, they are intelligent. They may not have as an extensive communication set as we do. They don't write things.
Right.
That is a whole nother level. They're not seen. I know there's a lot of people that think, oh, well, they speak like a language such as this or that. But if you compare them, if you compare that, again, anthropomorphism sinking into that theory as well. But the other thing is, we don't see them using fire. We don't see them using complicated tools. If they're going to actually have an advanced language such as us, one would think, or, some people say, oh, it sounds like a Native American language or whatever. If they were to have a language, you would think they would be a little more far along the evolutionary chain, using fire, using a little more complicated tools. They would be in the next step of evolution, but they're not.
Yeah, I agree with that. And the different types of primates and the different types of vocalizations that they use, what have you noticed in similarities between Sasquatch and known primates?
Well, from what the biggest thing I've noticed is the hoots, the whoops, the whoops and the hoots. Myself and I was out a couple of years ago in my research area one where I've had 2 sightings my own self amongst other people over the years. It's where the Fort Ann cats came from. It's where my primary research area. A couple of years ago, I was out there with Mike Lucci and Alex Petikoff and a filmmaker by the name of Eric Swanson.
Mm-hmm.
And Eric had his recorders going, thank goodness. And I am in the camp, and Alex and Mike and Eric are on the roadside. And I whistle a couple of times and I go, come on, fellas, I've been coming up here for 20 years. You know who I am. Come on, just make yourself known. And, within 2.5 minutes, we get a whoop call. And it was recorded by Eric, and it was clear as day. So they do respond. And again, that's anthropomorphizing a little bit on my end by speaking English to them. But I figured they know my voice. They hear me for the last 20 years of going to this research area. And in 2010 through 2013, they were very responsive. When they would hear me, I would always come there. I've always came there and announced myself. And very similar to the way Jane Goodall did it with the chimps, and the way Diane Fossey did it with the gorillas, is you got to make yourself known. If you keep making yourself known and they realize you're not a threat, then they're liable to kind of warm up to you a little bit.
Right. Well, it's kind of no different than cats or dogs, right? they may not understand a lick of our English, but they sure do understand our tone.
Right.
They understand our intent, right? And while it's not, we don't anthropomorphize them, we do kind of in a way where we give them more attribution that they understand a lot more than they actually do, right? And I think it's healthy to try to, project some of that. I've done it several times going into
on a really
area.
interesting note, Sean. This is something dogs that do that chimpanzees cannot. And that is, do you know, dogs are born with the ability to look where we point. It's in their DNA.
Interesting.
Puppies will do it. You start pointing at a puppy, the puppy will look. But they've tried it with wolves, they've tried it with foxes, and they've tried it with chimpanzees, and none of them do that.
And it's just probably from domestication through
DNA. It's a DNA change.
Right. Well, we've often talked about that kind of response. We have a embedded response to certain situations, right? It's almost like a learned behavior that's been, a DNA pass through, right? Why would that be any different from dogs? And we've been domesticating them for thousands of years. So it's not new. I think that's fascinating though. I didn't know that until you said that.
That's why you're like.
But again, though, that's not projected. That's proven, right? That's something.
That's evolution too. It's just how they've evolved.
Matt, Henry Bake, any questions for Steve here in the vocalizations category? You're muted, Matt. Almost unmuted.
There we go.
There you go.
No, I was going to say the whole thing with the pointing thing. I know my dog, every time I point, she doesn't look that way. She just does her own thing.
What kind of dog?
It's a pug. Just like
yeah.
If I had food there, maybe she would do that. But so you go into the different type of vocalizations through primates. What was besides the whoop? What other vocalization do you think is key for Sasquatch?
I think the biggest one is not so much the scream, because they're from a distance. The vocals I like to hear are the ones that are closer by, the whoops, and probably a grunt or two. Ugh. Now, I caught one, believe it or not, on my recorder back in 2010. And what we did is I left the recorder going in the camp, and we left the camp to go walking. And within a half hour of that recorder being there, you could hear something walking up to, you can hear leaf litter movement. And you just hear this. So the grunting is very, that's more of to me, it's more of a curiosity thing to them, But the whoop, their whoops, the reason why they're so important is that is their way of checking in. If they're going to whoop they're just checking in. And that means you're looking at a more friendly encounter. And in my research area, we had, and I'm going to give away a little secret. I have a bonus in What Would Sasquatch Do coming out. It's a series of pictures where we actually got a profile of what we believe is one of the creatures. We got an eye shine as it's walking by us.
Oh, wow.
Just one eye. And you actually have a series of 2 pictures. We heard it, and I had a flash camera. This goes back to 2012. But as they get to know you, we would constantly have this movement in towards our camp. We would go out, they would move back, and then we would go back to camp, and then they would come back in, and this would go on all night long.
Yeah.
And there would be times we would walk down the roadway, and we would be parallel. We'd hear something walking on both sides of the road with us, to the point where I came back. And I sent my son and his buddy down. I go, take a walk down. Let me know what you do. They came back and they said something was following us on both sides of the road. I'm like, So you get this, and that was the whole goal at that time. We were really building that interaction. But over the years, something terrible happened. It was called the pandemic.
Yeah.
And what happened is everybody went to the woods. And for the last couple of years, it's been really quiet there. But then all of a sudden, it's starting to pick up a little bit again. So,
Yeah, that's a good point, though. The increased activity of folks going into the wilderness because it's the only place you could go. Had to have stirred up, and pushed them away or pushed them further into these spots that they do go to. It made a big difference. I think Matt and I, because we research in such a remote area, I think we were lucky, Steve, just because population density, there weren't a lot more people going to these areas. The areas we search aren't really a state park. It's in a park, but it's not an area people go. There's no attraction to go there outside of hunting season. Would you agree with that, Matt? Like, there's nothing really driving folks there arbitrarily.
Yeah, I mean, this area here is so remote, and it has the area where we're at. We're right next to the largest roadless area in Pennsylvania. So, really, the only people that come up there are fishermen, hunters, and people camping and backpacking. And when people backpack, they're just staying on the trail. They're not going off trail.
Right.
They're not going into the deep hollows that I've been exploring. And but the problem is that there's so many of them up there that it's like looking for a needle in a haystack.
Oh, good God. Well, you could get lost, Steve, just by driving the back roads if you didn't have an expert like Matt. We have to get you up here or down here to our area. Matt, Steve's to the north of us. We have to get him out to the area. We just had Alex and Mike Lucci there last year, and they've been coming out with us because it's an area of high interest. I think we'd like to see get out.
Well, you guys got to come up to the Adirondacks in fall time.
Yeah, we do.
Oh, yeah.
And come up to my research area because there's always something that goes on. Not always, but
no, we have to. We have to. I'm a big fan of squatching when the weather's a little cooler. I'm getting a little older and a little fatter, so I don't exactly enjoy the humidity. If you catch my drift.
And that's the other thing too. In that particular part where I'm at, the peak season seems to be August, September, October, November, and dies out through mid-December.
Right now, why do you think that is? Do you think that activity dies down, Steve, and they go to areas where it's a little bit more temperate, or do you think it's because there's not a lot of people out there to report it?
Well, the reason why I think, I'm not sure the reason why they go to that particular area in the first place, but if you look at the dynamics of the area, you have the, Whitehall, New York, which is the Bigfoot capital of New York, right? And it's nestled in between the eastern side of the Adirondack State Park and the Green Mountain National Forest. Now, in the Adirondacks, in the fall time, by the winter time, all the trees in that part of the Adirondacks, which is maple, birch, oak, they all lose their leaves. So there's no cover.
Mm-hmm.
But the Green Mountain National Forest is, deciduous fir trees and evergreen. So I think what happens is we've noticed there's a movement in the springtime into the Adirondacks, and in the fall time, it's back to the Green Mountains, or by December, I should say, it's back to the Green Mountains. And what's in the crosshairs? Whitehall, New York, which is why they have so many sightings.
Right. It's Matt, you were kind of on this last episode of Skyline Sasquatch on the Adirondack Bigfoot files. You kind of were talking about that yourself, but about the transversing of the Appalachian Trail, but also the I don't want to call it migration because it's really not migration, but movement, Sasquatch movement.
Yep.
Which, by the way, folks, if they haven't, they got to check that out.
It's actually a seasonal migration, and it is, what? It is common amongst primates. We did it as Aboriginal Native Americans, they had their summer homes and their winter homes too. So
Right.
it's the beautiful thing about primate behavior. It's constant amongst all of the great apes.
Yep.
More info for you folks. That's why we like to have people like Steve on the show to help educate some of the dumb ones like us.
Yeah.
Henry, what do you got? I see you're popping there, brother.
He's muted.
No, hold on a second. I think, Henry, hold on. Try that again, Mulami.
Testing. 1, 2, 3.
Now we got you.
Okay. No, I had a statement I wanted to make about how people get into the woo and everything. Well, the late John Green said he didn't feel comfortable, or he didn't feel there was anything attractive about solving one mystery by bringing in another mystery, which I happen to agree with.
Well, the amazing thing about that is it is attractive to a lot of people. For the fact is, it gives them an out or a way to explain everything. The reason it's paranormal. It's trying to explain something without explaining it. And I think for some people who are like Eric Beckshard, for example, who was a flesh and blood guy, right? But he's so anthropocentric, meaning that he thinks that his species is the smartest of them all.
No.
Right. That's the reason why we can't, because they're smarter than us. They are, they can do all this magical stuff, and that will explain away why we can't find them, and that's just not good enough.
It's just the one thing that always frustrates me about that is there's no proof whatsoever anywhere about all these claims folks make that attribute to these behaviors. What other creature transverses dimensions? What other creatures speak to us telepathically? Like what other? It's not documented. It's not proven. And so why try to spin these ridiculous notions to something that we have a hard time proving in flesh and blood terms to people? I mean, yeah, there are many of us that know this thing exists or would like this thing to exist and are comfortable making that statement. But to the overall general public and to the scientific community, it's not accepted as fact yet. And when you put those things out there, makes us look even loonier than looking for giant apes out in the woods. It doesn't help.
The problem is they listen to certain people who have illusionary superiority. And what happens is they begin to believe in what they are hearing, and then they become what we call they have cognitive dissonance. They don't want to listen to scientific fact. They totally reject the facts as they see them. You see cognitive dissonance when it comes to the Ketchum study. You see Melba, instead of taking what other scientists are saying, instead you have her say it's a conspiracy against me. It's very apparent that, and you couple that with illusionary superiority where a veterinarian thinks they're a genetics expert, and you begin to see a trend. And what happens is you get a bunch of people that follow these people, and then they begin to pile on, and before you know it, you have a religion more than you have a science.
Right. And that gets dangerous, and it becomes cult-like. And it's not that I begrudge anybody, Steve, from having their own opinions. That's fine. Right. It's when you start forcing them at people and saying things with such certainty that it becomes offensive and it becomes detrimental to the work the rest of us are trying to do. And it's where it just doesn't, it's not where it belongs. We do have a comment here I'll pull up from Ron Meldrum. Explaining Bigfoot mysteries with woo is like saying your cell phone works on magic. Right. Well, I guess if we showed these cell phones to the, unindoctrinated or folks that don't know that technology exists, it would be magic, right? Isn't there an Arthur C. Clarke quote around that? Or a quote from someone around indistinguishable from magic?
Today's science was yesterday's magic.
Right.
And I forget what movie that came from. That was a quote from a movie.
Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Arthur C. Clarke. I knew he did. He had a quote on that somewhere, and that's true. I mean, but we're not talking about us being ignorant to technology. We're talking about not having the ability to detect it with our current technology, or that we're just making shit up because it sounds cool, and maybe we saw it on an episode of some science fiction show and thought it was a great thing to add to Bigfoot.
If I may add one thing too, and one of my biggest pet peeves is people assuming that Bigfoot knows what a trail camera does or an audio recorder does or any of that stuff. That is anthropomorphism to the highest extent. They have no clue what a trail camera does. If anything, they may see a foreign object and be leery of it just for that fact.
Steve, magic is fake. Steve, our good friend Steve, who's a magician. He's a magician, so he can say that.
But we've had that discussion here multiple times about trail cams and things like that. And a lot of it isn't as much that it understands how these things work, is you change their environment when you put it up.
Right.
Yeah.
And I have proof from a trail cam I have that when I put the trail cam up, all the deer and all the animals flocked to it because I changed the environment. The smells were different. I moved things around. They wanted to know why. They didn't care what the box was. They wanted to know why that tree was important to me.
Yeah. Well, the other thing too is, who the hell says they didn't see you putting it up in the first place?
Right.
Mm-hmm. And now they're wondering, is this some sort of trap? Is this some sort of, because understand what they're learning from us. A lot of the stuff they learn for people that interdict into their habitats are hunters.
Correct.
So what they're learning is why is there avoidance of humans? Because they're used to seeing humans in their habitats hunting other animals. And when we start setting things up, they get leery of them, and rightfully so. That is proper primate logic and abstract thought.
Yeah, we used to talk about that quite a bit back in the old days, Steve. They got used to any time they pull something out to point it towards them, they're waiting for a boom. They're not waiting for, why would you stick around, wait for something new, a human to come out and take your picture? Every time they pull something out on you, it ends up hurting something or killing somebody. Yeah.
Right.
And that's just truth. Guys, we're here at the end of the show already. Steve, when's the book coming out, for folks already asking that question?
It comes out March 1st.
March 1st. You get your copy. Where can they get it?
At midnight. It'll be on Amazon, and I'll have the link on my website as well as soon as it comes up.
Your two websites for folks that want to check you out, Steve?
Well, I just have the one main website at SquatchDetective.com, but there'll also be a link on any of my beginning March, the first show after March 1st. We'll have a link. I think Sunday is March 2nd. So Sunday night, we'll have the link in the show description as well.
Right. And they can go listen to, they can go watch Squatch Detective TV, Squatch DTV, Steve. Where can they check it out at?
YouTube.com/@SquatchDTV.
Man, this hour went by too quick. We got to do this again, my friend.
Absolutely.
We loved having you on. Henry, any final thoughts there, my friend?
Well, as far as the cult aspect, I don't want to mention any names of cultists in Bigfoot, but their initials are Matthew Johnson. Oh, did I say that?
Henry throwing shade. Spitting facts and throwing shade tonight. Henry May, he's ornery. He's ornery. Matt, Bake, any final thoughts?
I want to thank you for coming on. Go ahead, Matt.
No, I'm going to say from what I saw from the book, I'm definitely going to get a hard copy of it, and it definitely a fascinating read. So and a lot of research into that. So that was outstanding.
If you send me $25 additional dollars, I will give it to you on February 29th.
Go ahead, Henry.
Speaking of books, I want to plug Daniel Perez's brand new book, Bigfoot at Bluff Creek. This is an excellent book. Highly recommend it. You can get it by emailing Daniel at perez952@sbcglobal.net. It's $39.54. Heck of a bargain. Recommend this book highly.
All right.
Yep.
Steve, one question I had for you that I didn't ask. Did you learn anything new while you were putting this book together?
Yes. And what it was, I actually forgot because I've already ingrained it into my learning, but I know it had something to do with burial. Because one of the topics I cover is do Sasquatch bury their dead? And a lot of times, my standard argument was that, again, that was something humans did. And if we buried their dead, we'd be finding their bones because burying preserves them. But how do you explain if they die in the wintertime in the Northeast? The ground is so hard.
Right.
That how would they dig them up? How would they dig? They would expend so much energy to do that it would be counterproductive to an animal in the wild, which is the reason why other primates don't do that, because they're in the wild.
There's times we don't dig graves because the ground's so frozen.
Yep, absolutely.
And we have machines to do that. Steve, my friend, again, a pleasure. Thanks for coming on with us.
Oh, anytime.
Yes,
anytime.
Thank you.
Yep. Had a great time, guys.
Thanks, my friend. Folks, you've been listening to the Sasquatch Experience. Sean Forker, James Baker, Matt Arner, Henry May, our guest tonight, Steve Kulls. Thanks for listening. And Henry, take us out with those dulcet tones.
Y'all be good or be good at it.
Keep on squatching, folks.
You've been listening to Sasquatch Experience. Please rate and review where this podcast has been consumed. To share your experience, visit us on Facebook, our website, or email us info@sasquatchexperience.com. Keep on squatching.